three-dimensional mapping, exaggeration of topo features, why and where the property, the hunt strategy behind the property based on the topography features, and then the habitat management strategy based on the topography features as well. So we're combining both manipulation to the habitat as well as hunt strategy all in one podcast with visual demonstration.
This is the Land and Legacy podcast brought to you by Whitetail Properties Real Estate. We're your hosts, Adam Keith
and Matt Dye. This is your weekly resource for habitat management, wildlife management, and recreational real estate. We hope you guys enjoy the show.
All right, guys, welcome back to another Land and Legacy podcast. Here we are kicking off another one coming at you guys, and I'm very excited for this podcast because we're incorporating more technology into the podcast this week by recording this live and then putting this on YouTube as well, because what we're going to do essentially break down a property, and it's got unique elevation terrain I'm very familiar with, but talk about the ways in which it is going to be hunted and managed based on the topography. So if you will, last week was kind of a part one. This is going to be a part two, more or less demonstration. So if you are just listening to this podcast, I certainly encourage you to go to the YouTube page, Land and Legacy, and watch this unfold. You're going to see the screen move. You're going to see Onyx incorporation. You're going to see three-dimensional mapping, exaggeration of topo features, why and where the property, the hunt strategy behind the property based on the topography features, and then the habitat management strategy based on the topography features as well. So we're combining both manipulation to the habitat as well as hunt strategy all in one podcast with visual demonstration. It's like a webinar, if you will, if you choose to partake. And I certainly encourage you to partake because it's going to be pretty stinking awesome. You're going to learn a lot, and I'm excited to be able to bring it to you. Now, before we dive into that, a couple more or less housekeeping notes. Appreciate all the requests coming in, guys, for consultations for 2026. They're rolling in the door, and things are getting booked up. So appreciate that. Keep that coming. There's a lot happening there, and a lot that we're going to be offering in 2026 new with the drone surveys that we're doing with Midwest Deer Survey, Jack Hudson over there, and combining forces in that avenue to reach more people, to do in-depth analysis through thermal drone surveys themselves. And so I'm very excited for that aspect on top of the consulting side of things. And there may even be one more new service that is going to blow your hats off your heads. So a lot's happening, a lot's coming to the Land and Legacy deal, in addition to a new groundwork series on YouTube at Whitetail Properties page. Groundwork is an addition to Land Beat. Land Beats are kind of going to be evolving in and of themselves as well. They're going to be changing slightly, but still informational, topic-based stuff. Groundwork series is actually looking at the calendar back there behind me and going topic by topic, kind of a podcast type format in a studio, but getting into the full library of information, B-roll content or footage that Whitetail Properties has, overlaying that with more of a podcast setting in a studio, diving deep into the topics of management. And they're going to be dropping in a timely manner so that you can utilize those techniques and those topics on your own property and still be hitting the windows of time. So ton is happening. Also, I have two clients who are looking for full-time managers, full-time and one part-time staff. Obviously, what they're looking for is a highly moral, ethical, hardworking individual who is an open mind, but someone who is ready to work on a property that is implementing the strategies that we talk about each and every week. One property is located in southern Missouri. One property is located in North Missouri. If you feel like you are a listener and someone who is interested in becoming a full-time property manager or a part-time property manager, please contact us. Again, we're looking for very special folks. What I'm going to be doing is fielding the inquiries that come through and then passing them on to the individual landowners for them to make their decision. But this is a platform, right, in which we are trying to help and assist landowners as well as listeners. And so this is an opportunity. If you feel that you are qualified, if you feel that you are a suitable candidate for one of those positions, then we would ask that you send us an inquiry about that. What we would like for you to do is go to the consultation tab on the website, landlegacy.tv, consultation tab, and instead of actually putting in a consultation request, just send us an email, come to me, send us an email, and just in the subject line, job openings, send us your information, and we will pass it along to the powers that be and work with individuals to find the right candidates to fill these positions. Guys, these are phenomenal farms, tier 3, tier 4 farms, or on their way to tier 4 farms that are obviously owned by eager individuals who are looking for people to assist them in the practices and the management that we, again, talk about week after week. We'll be working alongside of us to implement those as well. Obviously, compensation is all dependent upon the landowners themselves, but they are fantastic people, two amazing individuals. So I'm confident that they are going to treat everyone fairly, equally, and encourage you. Again, if you feel like that you can fulfill those needs and that responsibility and something you would like, send us the email. Okay, part 2, topography features. Wow, I am literally ready for this one. Again, if you are coming into the podcast, I did a part 1 series talking about how topography is some of the baseline foundational principles in which we manage upon. And you have to have an integral understanding of the differences in topography to begin to make management implications and strategies and management decisions. No matter where you're at, Florida, Vermont, Montana, Kansas, Texas, or Tennessee, it does not matter. Every single one of those different sites and minor topography or extreme topography is going to have differences on the landscape that are going to be highly impacted based on that topography. And then because of that, deer are going to be, elk are going to be, turkeys are going to be navigating that terrain or the topography or those properties based upon a combination of the habitat as well as topography features on a given property. We've talked about it many times in the past, how at the end of this, right, if you really boil it down, you might only be hunting 10, 15, maybe max 20% of a property when you are able to stack on top of and match holistically, strategically, topography and habitat management with distinct features such as food and bedding and transition. When you do that, the game becomes more simple, okay? And that's what I'm going to share with you today and how we're going to go about basically this more or less in-depth look at a property. So with that being said, enjoy, but make sure you check out the YouTube version of this, because if you're listening to it on the podcast, I'm going to be very specific about what I'm talking about in relation to specific topo lines. This 1,300 foot elevation change, or this line and this particular feature, and point it out with a mouse. And so you're going to want to follow along with that very closely as we go into the actual podcast itself. So let's dive in, and I'm going to switch over everything here to, instead of just me talking, I'll switch over to the screen and we will share this screen here. All right, should be up. Okay, so right now what you're looking at is the two-dimensional map of the property, okay? We've got a bunch of different features on here, a bunch of different shapes and, lines, etc. on this, different TSI stands, degrees of thinning and, old field management, types of old field management, medium TSI, different stands, so on and so forth. So don't get confused with that. I'll explain that when it's necessary. But we're looking at a two-dimensional map, right? Top down, and we have topo lines running across this, okay? What I'm going to do now is turn on the three-dimensional map, right? So now it changes the plane in which we're looking at this. And I'm also, the bottom right-hand side, going to take that exaggeration line of the topo features and let's blow it up a little bit. So we get some exaggeration of what it is that we're looking at. And we start to see this property really unfold and begin to take shape. The topo lines now aren't just lines on a two-dimensional map. They are correlating, right, with the hills and the valleys that you see on that given map. So essentially, you can look at this thing and say, okay, wow, it's a great tool, let's say, to learn topo lines if you don't know what topo lines mean. So that's certainly a start. But there's a couple particular tree stands that I want to point out to you on this map itself. And one of them in particular is this green one right here. Oop, I clicked on a trail camera location. This green stand right here. Southeast wind is what would be required to hunt said tree stand. But first and foremost, access to the farm is right up here to the northeast. We have a primary road running across this pasture, along the top of the pasture. So we are very close, right, to an entrance and not disturbing much when cows are in here. From the actual entrance, it's 500 yards, okay? So to some people, that's a long ways, but when it's just pasture, it's not. There's not much back behind you on a southeast wind. So this is right, orienting ourselves north to south. To the top of the screen is north, the bottom is south. So when we hunt this with the southeast wind, in a morning situation in particular, right? Here's that stand again. In a morning situation, east is now back behind, at our backs, and the sun is going to be baking and hitting this slope aspect itself because it is a southeast and east facing slope. So it's going to get sun immediately. So it's going to start warming up quickly, right? So when it starts warming up quickly, thermal wise, what does that mean? Well, that means that, okay, this tree stand and on a southeast wind, the wind direction as well as the thermal activity that's going to happen, because we're not always going to have consistent winds. I think that's so important for people to understand and realize that it is a forecasted southeast wind. That means it's probably going to blow some out of the east, some out of the south, and then sometimes it's not going to be blowing at all. Even though it says 6 to 8 mile an hour wind or 8 to 10 mile an hour wind, it's going to be gusty, it's going to be switching, it's going to be east at 6, then switch out of the south to 8, or drop to 2 out of the southeast. What that does in topography, right, in areas that have terrain, is called tumbling action, okay? That tumbling action is what we call swirly winds. But it's the inconsistency of day winds or wind currents and the inconsistency of the terrain that's causing this mixing, as well as air temperatures changing. So, long ways to say, essentially, to hunt areas that have topography consistently, what you oftentimes and most times want to do is have the wind direction that you're hunting on correspond and correlate with the thermal action of that area. Okay, so let's show this same stand. If we were going to hunt it in an evening, we would likely be bumping deer the last 45 minutes to 30 minutes of daylight, and I'll explain why. Okay, so in the morning, thermals are rising. They're going up back behind us in this action, beyond the tree stand, moving past. And what we're trying to do is hunt deer that are moving along this road, right? Maybe dropping down into this big valley over here, or working up this tree line over here, because really what's happening is over here, a couple hundred yards away, there's a big food plot, and we're letting deer work out of that food plot down this road. East-southeast wind is a nice little cutting wind. So they're able to scent check everything down below them, scent check past this red area, which is a bedding area, right? And move right along this road. And that thermal action as the day is getting, or as the sun is coming up, right? The day is getting longer. We're having more sunlight warm up the earth surface, and we have a southeast wind. All that scent is moving up the hill and back behind us, the same direction in which we accessed the stand itself. Makes sense, right? We don't have competing factors all hurting us, let's say, from a scenario of how do we get in, how do we get out, what do we do with the wind? Well, we're blowing it back out into the edge of a pasture, and we're giving the deer a great wind to be able to travel this section of road and property past some likely areas, right, off of food. So we're not bumping the food. We're not bumping that bedding area, getting in. And the wind direction for a buck cruising or checking scrapes up and down that woods road is perfect and ideal for them, but it's also perfect and ideal for the hunter, right? So that works perfectly for a morning. Hopefully all of that makes sense. But what it does not do is work perfectly for an evening. Now, of course, we have the opposite that's happening. Looking at the way the sun moves across the sky, what's happening now is this is the shady side of a slope, right? Because the sun's going to set in the west. So the sun is setting way over here on the horizon. And as that's happening, the Earth is cooling. So the opposite of the morning is happening. And we also already have early shade on this area because we're below the crest of the ridge. And what that is going to do is, as those day winds decrease, even if you've got a forecasted 6 to 8 mile an hour southeast, what's going to happen the last little bit of light, and as shadows begin to fall and cool that specific area, because over the crest of this, where the sun is setting of that hill, you're going to then have thermals dropping. They're going to drop right into this big drainage right here. And this drainage is the head of a very large system that goes out into a river. So like this is a very large drainage system, and we're at the very head of it, right? So the thermals and the cooling air is going to drop and race down across, right, in front of where you're wanting to hunt. This area, I'm going to highlight here in red, is what is within bow range, right? We want deer below us, not behind us because of the winds, but when we hunt it, or if we were to try to hunt it in an evening situation, we would end up bumping the deer that are directly in front of us, therefore probably not getting a shot or educating deer. It's never the target deer that comes in first. I think this is often people are like, well, I'll it's okay if I don't bump the target deer. That target deer is never the first one. And when you bump all the others, you're probably going to decrease your chances, right, of harvesting the target. So in an evening situation, this doesn't work. But in a morning situation, it works perfectly. And yes, it'd be nice to be able to hunt deer going to the food, but we could also potentially hunt the food. Just because this stand set right here doesn't work great for an evening doesn't mean that it's a bad set. It just means that, hey, I'm going to knowingly only hunt that or restrict myself to hunting that on a southeast morning and have great success, right? If I'm choosing to not hunt it on days that are going to be advantageous for the deer to smell me, right? Then it's going to be like I'm hunting a fresh stand. It's when you are and your exit is good, your entry is good. It's like you're not hardly hunting that. Is there some ground scent that is left? Certainly, right? Not saying that there's no footprint of your existence there, but it is way better when you obviously aren't bumping deer in those locations. So oftentimes, like I get very excited for this stand site itself. So like this is one that, even though it has some restrictions to it on obviously wind direction, wind speed, and time of the day in which I hunt it, this is one of the hottest spots on the farm because of some of these massive topography features that we're going to talk about, right? Like if you look at it from this food standpoint, right, this is the food, and deer leave, move through this down the road. You can see just topography wise, it's not very far before the topography drops off sharply, and it becomes very difficult, or they have to go through ravines, right? They have to ski slope it, moguls, just to be able to get to the same destination. Well, oftentimes because of that thermal action that's going to take place and be the peak of taking place at the head of these drainages that you see right here, even some micro drainages along this road right here, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 on this really big one right here. You can see that this trail and this road system is at the very head or the top of those drainages. And when we look at it from this way too, we can also see that. That's what's so great about this 3D exaggeration. If we can't see that, now I'll bump up the exaggeration. You'll say, oh boy, wow, yeah, there it is. Right? You can see just how sharply now that exaggeration begins to drop off and cause way more of a important way more of an important feature to look at from a topography standpoint, because deer aren't just going to travel through elevation that goes up and down and all around. They're avoid those types of areas because they take the path of least resistance. Might be more steps to walk, but they're going to loop around some of those areas. That's why this stand set is so good back here. We have super clean entry through the pasture. We're blowing our wind in a direction that's also very clean. And then we've got the drainages that are all congregating the activity along this roadbed. And of course, right, we've got scrapes and we've got cameras that are monitoring, and we're going to pick up bucks and does that are going to hit this scrape back here first before they make it to the destination food source back over here, probably hit this scrape and camera on their way out. Like, we have multiple points of contact with deer that we know, okay, hey, if I'm picking them up here and here, they're obviously going to the destination, but I just am keen in on how the topography features are corresponding with all this type of movement. Now, the other thing, as we zoom out, that makes this even better is that obviously kind of take there's 3 yellow roads, right? We have the right road is dotted, and then the yellow road that is solid over here. That's more of a primary road, okay? So that primary road and this far right dotted road is kind of the point in which the ridge begins to break and drop off into steeper topography. We can kind of see that right here easily. But what is harder to tell is that right over here to the left is there's another drainage system on the west side of the slope, right? So we see, okay, if there's a drainage on the other side of the slope, what point are the deer that are then running parallel kind of right down these roads, are they going to begin to cross, right? Are they going to cross this ridge at a place? Well, certainly this food plot is going to steer and have big influence on that. But oftentimes too, we can see minor saddles in the slope, right? And this being one of them, I'm going to draw it in. It's subtle, but in the grand scheme of things, in the complex of this property, it moves and steers a lot of deer, right? So what it is this movement right here, right? They're avoiding this big drainage over here, right? They're paralleling the ridge, and then they break over and come across at the top of the drainage, right? Right where the tree stand is at, because guess what? They're going to continue and then work this hard edge going down, right? So deer that are down over here, same thing. They're kind of in reverse, do this number to avoid this massive drainage system right here. And I probably should exaggerate it a little bit more because it is distinct. It is deep, and you're not commonly at all seeing deer traverse through it. They're going around it, right? So when we have areas that they are going around, that means they're avoiding certain areas. Perfect, right? That allows us to be able to say, okay, if you're avoiding that area, then you're pinched here, right? That drainage and the head of that drainage, these drainages, and then over here as well, create that. And then this tiny little higher spot right here creates the point in which deer are dropping and crossing this broad saddle right across here and looping around the top of this drainage, creating a pinch point. So not only deer just that are running north and south, but ones that are crossing over and running east to west are also relating heavily to that drainage, the head of that drainage feature. And again, still with that same movement, if deer aren't, we back that out, if deer aren't just moving north and south from the destination food past this point, and they're moving east and west, that southeast wind is still very good for this set. So what we are creating, and I hope that you're seeing come to light and come to life, is just because that tree stand set has, again, some of the restrictions that we're talking about, it has so much more going for it because of the topography feature. So I would much rather have a set that is dynamite when it comes to the side of entry exit and the side of a big terrain feature that I can access and utilize to my advantage, where I know that its impact is influencing deer coming from multiple directions, because it's creating a point, a pinch point, but creating a point of avoidance and like creating an area where deer aren't going to naturally normally want to travel. They're going to go, again, around it and around the top of things. And then we also have, again, like, the open pasture side of things. Deer cross this fine, but if they have the ability to stay in the timber, stay in a little cover, well, great, they're going to do that too. So that is just a beautiful set right there. And to those who don't hunt terrain, or obviously to those who aren't familiar, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal when you're looking at it from a terrain standpoint wise. But this angle right here is a really good angle, kind of from the northwest looking towards the southeast. Just how dramatic that drainage is. But this is a very good set, like a very prominent point on the property in which it steers deer very, very well. And so that is a huge aspect that I want people to be able to see and key into on their own properties, that, wow, it may be a drainage, and I'm overlooking the head of these drainages, and I'm overlooking these subtle saddles that correspond and correlate to that other drainage. In theory, I was just thinking, I could hunt deer going to the food, but maybe why is it so good? And oftentimes too, like you might be someone who found a really good trail that goes around some of the stuff, or a creek crossing, and you don't know why those sets are so good. Well, here's information why. Like here is why it's advantageous for a deer to do it, or why it's an area that they want to avoid, and why they're choosing so frequently to go around these spots. So there's one of them, and I'm going to show you really another set here. I'm going to back it up and go to a different spot here on the farm. And what it's going to be is essentially this green set right here. This is where I actually killed a buck last year, November 14th, I think it was. This is a set that's really in the center of this farm. And just a little bit of information, like the blue area is more of a thicker medium TSI. Some of it's been logged, still needs to have the TSI portion. The purple is the old field, and then we have pasture on either side of the old field. It's just an area that does not get cut for hay, so it's wing stem, goldenrod, ragweed, a little bit of blackberry kind of going up through there, but it's not mowed and cut hay on either side of it. So it's a corridor, and it's a place that deer cross naturally. And it's also, right, as you look through it, it's a drainage itself, and it moves deer nicely from basically, as we zoom out a little bit, one big wood block to our east, or excuse me, I guess it would be really to the north, but on the right side of the screen, across what would be two big open hay fields, and then back to another wood block. But as you can see, right, that green stand right there, I don't know why. Disregard that right up top. It says north northeast. That's a typo. It should be north northwest to a west wind. You can hunt that set on. And here's the reason why. As I zoom out a little bit, I want you to see this ridge and bluff form behind this point right here. Okay. Watch it above that river just get very exaggerated. Okay. We can see just to the right through here, there's a hard drop, right? It goes bam, just super steep the way it falls off this back behind. So there's a very narrow band in which deer can travel along the backside, right below several. Let's go. What's the elevation drop there? 60 foot, probably 60 to 80 foot elevation change from where the tree stand is. Heck, it's more than that, 80 to 100 foot drop before you get to basically the next bench on that bluff below. And this is a very steep bluff. So again, with a north-northwest, that's coming from this direction, blowing out across over top of this bluff, blowing out this way, right, to the right, way over the top of any deer that is walking down on the lower, again, 60, 80 foot down. So your scent is blowing way over top of them when it's coming from the north-northwest out of this direction over here. And so you're blowing it back across and not having deer get to essentially scent check you, right? They can, I'm not saying there's not deer downwind of you, but the elevation change, they're so far down that they're not able to smell you, even though they are technically laterally wise downwind. So anyways, this set during the rut is a great connector transition piece that allows you to hunt deer when they're moving from a big block of timber, several bedding cuts up here that have now been implemented, to more block of timber down below and kind of this south facing slope. So as the season gets longer and the days get shorter and the temperatures get cooler and the need for thermal regulation increases to stay warm on those cold days, November, December, January, this south slope bedding right here on this big point is pretty magical, right? So we have a lot of deer that then cross and transition November, December through this old field. And when you hunt this one set, it blows it back across this bluff. And so essentially during the rut, we had the ability to be calling deer, and basically they couldn't get downwind of us to hear and see what was happening. We just blew the sound over the shoulder, and they came to the edge of that bluff and got shot because we observed them crossing this old field and made contact with the grunt, and they came to investigate. But this is another great set to where you can easily use topography and see how it's going to be restrictive to deer movement and use that to your advantage and be a little bit more aggressive as well. So it's a wonderful opportunity to use the steepness and know that, hey, if deer are going to be downwind of me on this bluff, it's going to be so far down, it's really out of my concern. I'm not worried about having to deal with them. They're too far away and down below me. I'm just going to blow the scent way over top of them. And then one of the other favorite sets, and this is more subtle in its elevation change, but it's kind of it's a new set. We haven't hunted it, right? But it is a new bedding thicket in place right here, okay? This set right here could be hunted on a east-southeast, mainly southeast wind, and it is going to be probably primarily an evening set, unless we have strong day winds, okay? Like when I say strong, I'm saying at sunrise, 6-8 mile an hour type winds. Day winds then are probably 10, 12, 15 mile an hour winds. We need consistent winds. What we don't want is a rising thermal to get scent, right? Our scent to not be overpowered by the day winds and push back behind us, because this is kind of be the east side over here, and right, the wind would be going back behind us. But we park down here, slide up the ridge, and then have this trail system, this longitude line, this topo line, as a new path essentially is created here along this topo, downwind of this bedding, right? Because if the wind is coming out of the southeast here, it is going to be scent checking, a deer will be scent checking along this new road, looping up and going out to a large destination food. It would be easily taking this path, right? So we were to park down here, slide up and get in, you're likely not bumping that deer at all in a morning, or in an evening. They might be already in the bedding thicket, or if bucks are cruising early afternoon and then make their way out to a destination food source, they are going to likely work this road system, but scent check the bedding right before they go out and into that larger destination food source. But it works topo wise, because see, that point, right, is where the bedding is at. It's more exaggerated point and figure out here. These topo lines are a lot broader, right? So they're wider here and here than they are in other locations. So it's a broader, flatter point. Deer love to bed out on these locations, especially when, right, you've manipulated the cover and the structure that's in there. Therefore, the vegetation type is denser and thicker. It grows back better for bedding. And because of that, then, right, deer would loop around that to scent check this, come up from the south, work the west side, swing around the west and the north end, and head out to food on a southeast wind. That's what our plan would be. Again, in the morning, we'd have to have a stronger day wind, so the rising thermal here did not push up and into the actual bedding thicket, but when our scent would rise, the day winds coming over that ridge would push it back behind us. Again, you need a stronger wind, 6+ to be able to do that in this type of topography is what we found has been best. In an evening, we would have our thermals sinking, right? They'd be sinking back behind us because the sun is setting, and therefore the thermals are dropping. And so that dropping of the thermals and the direction in which the wind is blowing are correlated and corresponding. So there's not going to be as much tumbling action with the wind. Sometimes the higher the wind speed in terrain like this, the worse it is. You think, wow, it's going to be super consistent. But the higher the wind speeds, the gustier everything becomes. And when you get gusty winds, you get surges of the wind, and then you get backdrafts and pulls because it like runs up these drainages over these ridges and on these knobs, and then it gets kind of like auto corrected and comes back. So you get this massive tumbling action. So all this to say, there's a rhyme and there's a reason. There's a good equation for hunting the varying terrain features and steepness of an area, in my opinion. But I really like days that are 6, 8, 10 mile an hour. When you get to 12, 15 plus in this, a lot of deer really just stay bedded up. They do not move a ton because it's so tumbling. They're not able to basically walk and have a consistent wind. And so therefore they're vulnerable, because when they're walking, they are scent checking what is out in front of them and coming to them, or what situation they're walking themselves into. So when it's very, if you will, volatile on the amount of turbulence and surging and gusty winds in those higher wind speed days, in this setting, in this terrain, it does not bode well, and we see a drop off in activity. But that medium wind speed really is a sweet spot for, hey, it's safe to be able to get into these places because we're going to have some consistency. We're going to match the way our thermals are going to work with the topography on this slope, and then it'll work. We're not trying to put a square peg in a round hole. We are trying to work with the wind speed, with the wind direction, and the way the thermals are going to work in that given area. When we can put those pieces of the puzzle together, we're going to have more consistent winds. When that is in your favor as the hunter to get into a set, but also in the favor of a deer to move through that area under those conditions, now we have a high probability of harvesting deer. I think that's what people often forget is, what's the wind direction? Great, I'm glad you asked, but there's more pieces to the puzzle that need to get put together and thought about with each tree stand set. You can't just say, man, that's a good straight tree, or hey, it's got some cover up there, I'll get there. No, you should be thinking about the thermal action. Is it matching the wind speed today? Is it matching that wind direction? But also, is it feasible for a deer under these conditions today, and or under the food resource that is close by, for them to utilize that now at this time of the year or under these conditions? So when I am thinking about, hanging a tree stand or planning a hunt or whatnot, I am always thinking about not just the day conditions, but the time of the year in which the resources around this area are going to be congregating the deer the most. And that's not to say that's not going to be good. Staying is only going to be good in late October and not January. That's not true. But there's bigger pieces, right, to that puzzle that would then make that statement become true. It's not just, hey, it's next to a cornfield in January, right? Bang, then it's going to be good. Oh, and they harvest in October. It's likely a function of cover, a function of slope aspect and thermal bedding, and does are going to be closely bedded to this because of the dense pocket of cover that's over there. All these different factors. But when I hang a tree stand set like this, or one of the first ones we looked at over here on this side of the ridge, I'm always thinking about those check boxes of, is my access good? Yes. Is the wind I need to hunt that on going to match the thermals in which I'm going to hunt it on, or have to hunt it on, or the way the thermal is going to react in that area? And the answer could be no. Okay, abandon. The answer could be only in the mornings or only in the afternoons. And you say, okay, check. Then it's just a morning spot. And then you go to, are the thermals going to be working with respect to the deer and how they would normally want to travel that area? Yes, specifically morning better, evening worse, whatever. And then what are the resources around it that would make deer want to do that, and what time frames of the year are they going to do that more so than others? Is it mass producing trees? Is it soft mass, hard mass? Is it a clover food plot or clover in the pasture? Whatever the case may be, those are the thought processes I need to have before I ever go and hang a set somewhere. That may seem like a lot of check boxes, but I promise you that's how you narrow down in our hunting quality sets and not quantity of sets. I don't need 30 different tree stands when I'm only going to hunt 6 of them and we'll have the same amount of success by having the 30 sets out there as I do the 6, because regardless, most of the success is going to come out of those 6 sets because they're the best ones, right? I don't need the rest of them. If I'm trying to go and hunt the 24 other stands, I'm probably just putting undue stress, pressure on the property. That's never a good thing. So you can quickly narrow down when you have a strict restraint on the property or the properties of a quality tree stand set. When you have that in place, you can begin to say, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go here. Ooh, that's going to be perfect for there. Every set is going to be a high quality set, in my opinion. So that's going to be, right, I'm not going to stay on the couch. I am going to go hunt. It's going to be a quality set, and I'm going to, get in there, have the conditions, all right, forecasted conditions too, hopefully working in my favor. And if not, if the forecast is wrong, then you get out. Or it may even be a set too. Kind of talked about this last week a little bit, but like we need to wait to get, leaf drop in this area before we hunt it. We need to wait to have no more leaves on the trees, and the wind is going to act a lot better in that area before we get in there. If not, it's super swirly. I've had many of those sets, and sometimes you have to learn the hard way and figure out, man, there's not a wind speed or a wind direction here that's working until you get late into a year. So I love all these different sets. Those are just 3 and 3 of some of my favorites. But there's a lot happening here on, right, where you can and cannot go to based on topo, based on the different features, based on a lot of different aspects of a given property. So fantastic showcasing OnX and the exaggeration of the 3D mapping, what that can do from a tree stand set. It is a phenomenal opportunity to look at properties, study them, learn them, and know how, hey, that's going to be a light TSI unit because it's only going to get morning sun, or this is on a ridgetop, higher on a ridgetop, to get more daylight and better timber. All those different things goes into the management strategy of why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that is what's so fun about our job, is being able to look at a property. Every property is different, and they all have different challenges. They all have different attributes that need to be managed around, because no 2 property is the same when it comes to topography, slope aspects, the pinch points, the ridges, then the distribution of those resources, hard mast, crop trees, food plots, ag fields, pastures in relation to all of that. So there's definitely a rhyme and a reason in the way we do things, why we do them, and I'm excited to be able to share some of that with you on this random example that I put together and just said, hey, wonder how we would manage this piece, right? And I think it's a great opportunity to showcase that and make that available to you guys through the opportunity of learning and looking at awesome features around this location. So anyways, guys, I appreciate you. Hopefully this was helpful, and you guys learned something about managing and hunting properties in topography like we do, day in and day out. It's a fun job, guys. We appreciate you. Appreciate you listening and following along to us. But have a great week. See you here next week.